What's happening, everyone? Welcome to the Wildcast podcast. I am Justin Spears, Arizona football beat writer, here with my guy, Michael Lev, senior writer and columnist. We'll be talking about a number of topics on this episode, from March Madness, NCAA Tournament, and also all things Arizona Wildcats athletics. What's happening with baseball, with softball. Lev, these teams are red hot right now. I think if I did the numbers correctly, I think they're like a combined 41-8 right now.
We spend so much time talking about the quote unquote revenue sports, which is understandable, right? Football and men's basketball, and then women's basketball is probably third in the pecking order right now. But I mean, look, Arizona is renowned for its baseball and softball exploits over the years. You kind of feel like if you're in California, Arizona, or Florida, maybe even Texas, you should be good at baseball and you should be good at softball, right? Mm-hmm. So as we get our technical difficulties figured out.
There you go. Playing DJ here. Okay.
I'm not surprised that baseball is doing really well. I think I said before the season that I thought this was an Omaha caliber team. Obviously a long way to go. And a first true road series coming up at West Virginia, which will be interesting weather, new ballpark, a lot of things that Arizona is not familiar with. And then softball I think it exceeded expectations a little bit, considering they didn't have Dakota Kennedy for a long time. Didn't seem to skip a beat at all. Now she's back. I mean, they almost have like more players than they know what to do with in the field, and they're getting pretty good pitching too from Devin Netz and Miranda Stoddard. So good start for both.
And we are going to talk about Arizona spring football later on in the podcast, because we just saw the first day out there at the Dick Tomey practice fields. The Arizona Wildcats getting ready for year 2 under Brent Brennan. A lot of new faces. Some jersey numbers were changed, like quarterback Noah Fafita going from number 11 to number 1. A lot of new coaches out there. It felt new. It felt like everything was just kind of scrubbed. Like what was last year was completely scrubbed, and they're kind of onward and upward to 2025, which could be a really big year for the Wildcats, or it could be a disaster. And, we're talking about Brent Brennan being on the hot seat and potentially losing his job. This is a very big year for Arizona football. And the vibes were they were very positive out at the Dick Tomey practice fields, which I would imagine they would be because it's spring, right? When you're in the spring, you're undefeated. You don't have any losses on your record. You feel good about where things are at right now. But we'll talk about the team and just kind of where they're at right now, and just some of our notable takeaways from the first day of practice. Lev, I do want to start talking about the NCAA tournament and March Madness. That's really what everyone has been talking about in Tucson this week. How is Arizona going to do in the NCAA tournament? Well, they fell short in the Big 12 tournament championship to Houston. I thought they had a well-fought battle in that game. Like, I think if you're an Arizona fan, you feel pretty solid. You feel decent about where this team is at right now, considering, the teams that they went up against this year. I think they are very battle-tested. My concern with this team, Lev, is the ability to close out games, because offensively, over the course of the season, we would see this team go on droughts to end games. And we saw that against Houston. They completely went dry, and Houston, them being the championship pedigree team that they are, I think they're going to go to the Final Four, maybe even win a national championship. They showed why they are one of the better teams in the country, because when it comes to winning time, they figured out a way to execute. So I don't know. This Arizona team, I feel weird. Now, they are the number 4 seed going into the East region, where they'll face the 13th seeded Akron Zips out there in Seattle. Our colleague Bruce Pascoe will be out there providing all the coverage there. It's the third time that Arizona is a 4 seed fourth time. The first 3 times, the first time they ended up cutting down the nets in 1997. The other 2 times they lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So it could be really great for Arizona, or it could be a disaster. I feel confident about this team. It's a hard draw in the East region. I do have my red flags, but I think this is a team that could make a run in March. Lev, what say you?
I feel confident that they're going to win their first matchup for sure. I feel pretty good about the second round, whether it's Oregon or Liberty, I think is the other team
Yeah.
over there. I don't really feel great about them going beyond that because they are a 4 seed, which is probably fair given their resume, their early season struggles, some little struggles down the stretch. They will, in all likelihood, if they get that far, they'll be going up against Duke. Now, they faced Duke earlier this year. They lost at home at McKale Center. This is a very different Arizona team than the one we saw back then. Like Henry Vesar had not blossomed at that time. Carter Bryant was still really green. Caleb Love was kind of still in his slump that had carried over from the previous season. So there's a lot of reason to think that Arizona would be more competitive this time. However, Duke might be the favorite to win the whole thing. And seems like Cooper Flagg is going to be healthy enough to play the presumptive, number 1 pick in next year's draft. I think they have 3 projected lottery picks on that team, among other parts. So it will be really, really hard to get past the Sweet 16 if it's Arizona against Duke. And the question then becomes, if it plays out that way, like how will people feel about Tommy Lloyd, right? Like there's already some, some dissatisfaction out there because they haven't gotten past that point.
Yeah.
And like is that the plateau? Like is that the ceiling for this team? For this program? I don't think so. They're certainly capable of more. But it's tough when, you run into a number 1 seed that's got all that talent. Again, we're kind of projecting a few steps down the line here. But yeah, I mean, I feel good, but like, I only feel good to a degree.
Yeah. And I agree with you about Henry Vesar blossoming into a really big time player, especially defensively. I think that to me has been the biggest surprise this year for Arizona basketball is not only Henry Vesar emerging as a guy, but playing solid defense. I didn't expect him to be like that. And he's more athletic than I thought he would, than I thought he was. And he runs up the floor very well. I'm a big fan of Henry Vesar, and I could see him being a first round pick at some point. I've seen a lot of guys have a great month of March and they play their way into becoming a first round pick. Heck, just ask Sam Decker, Wisconsin, what that was like. I mean, he went off, he went ballistic in that 2015 NCAA tournament and ended up becoming a late first rounder, if I'm not mistaken. So this is where a lot of guys really make their money. Heck, I didn't expect Dalen Terry to be a first round pick that year that he left, and he ended up becoming one. So I'm not saying that Henry Vesar is going to leave for the NBA this year, but he is showing signs of being a first round pick and a guy that can play at that level, which is really good for Arizona because I kind of wrote him off, not going to lie to you, at the start of the year, just because I didn't really quite know what to expect. Just because his first 2 years of the program, he just kind of was MIA. And the second year really wasn't his fault because he got into a freaking golf cart accident. But we just hadn't really seen Henry Vesar. And so I just figured, okay, Mo Krivas is here. They have these other guys. Henry Vesar, we'll see what he's got. And he's been a pleasant surprise.
He's got a lot. He really does. He's very mobile. He's very aggressive. Like he looks skinny, but he doesn't play small at all. Like I feel like he affects a gazillion shots a game, stuff that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. He can hit a 3-pointer if you need him to. Like when you look, you think about what NBA teams want in a big man these days, like can you block shots? Can you protect the rim? And can you shoot threes? Henry can do both of those things, and he probably needs to add 20 pounds or so, to be really effective in the NBA. And it remains to be seen if he will do that here next year or with an NBA franchise. But I agree with you. I think probably the kind of the biggest story of the year, really, when you look at the roster, the personnel, has been the development of Henry, and it kind of only happened in a way because Mo Krivas got injured. Like, we do not know how this would have played out if Krivas had remained healthy. He did not, and Henry got his chance. Tommy has said, many times, like, oh, I've always been a Henry believer. I've stuck with him, yada, yada. Well, it didn't really show in the playing time earlier in the season, did it?
No.
But yeah, sometimes it's all about getting that opportunity, right? And once that opportunity arose, Henry really took advantage of it.
Henry Vasar, the Khalil Tate of Arizona basketball.
Oh, I've written as much. I mean, he's not quite Mr. October, but hey man, maybe he'll be
March.
Mr. March, right?
You never know.
So hey, can I throw some stats at you?
Sure.
From Ken Palm that I was looking up earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. So I found this super interesting. Number one, if according to Ken Palm's definition of strength of schedule, Arizona played the fourth hardest schedule in the country this year. And the three teams ahead of them are SEC teams, and the two teams behind them are also SEC teams. So 5 of the first 6 of the hardest schedules were SEC. Arizona came in at number 4. So I thought that was super duper interesting. The other thing is he does something called adjusted tempo, which is possessions per 40 minutes. Akron, which is Arizona's first round opponent, 16th in the country in adjusted tempo, which means they play like the 16th fastest of any team out there.
Zippy.
All the way down at number 360 would be your Houston Cougars.
Oh man.
And I mean, that was a big theme, I feel like, especially the first matchup, and definitely just the way Houston plays. It's gonna be a slog, right? I mean, it's gonna be a grinded out every single possession type of game. So a big contrast between the two. Certainly, Akron does not have as much size or muscle or as much defensive intent as Houston does. I mean, it's just a really, really, really good defensive team, maybe the best defensive team in the country. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Arizona likes to play fast. It's definitely their preference to do that. I don't think Akron's going to change the way they play in this particular game. They're probably going to try to play fast and try to hit a bunch of threes and hope that Arizona's cold. But Wildcats should be able to dominate the paint, the glass, as our guy Barkley chimes in there from Justin's house. But yeah, I mentioned earlier, like, how are people going to feel about Tommy if they make it to the Sweet 16 and lose to Duke? That remains to be seen. I know exactly how they will feel if they lose to Akron. And sum it up in one word: unhappy.
Fired. Oh, okay.
Hot seat.
Yeah.
I mean, like, as great as his record has been, like, you can't lose again in the first round. You just can't.
No.
Yeah, and I don't think they will.
Because I mean, we were just talking about Henry Vasar. This is his game. Him, Toby Awaka.
Yep.
Toby,
even
like
Trey. Maybe
Trey
Townsend. Yeah.
Because I think they're big men. They're guy from England. I forgot his name. Barkley's trying to tell me his name. But he's 6'8". He's a really good rebounder. But if you look at the size, Arizona's obviously has that advantage. So I feel like this has to be a front court game for Arizona. And who knows what it's going to look like on the backcourt side of things. I do like the way KJ Lewis is trending, though. I think he's a guy that's trending in the right direction. He had a really good Big 12 tournament, and he's really good defensively too. Diving on loose balls, making a lot of gritty plays. I think you pointed out that Carter Bryant does a lot of stuff that doesn't really show up on the box score in the stat sheet. So Arizona, I feel like they're in a really good place right now going into the tournament, but we shall see.
It was nice to see KJ shed the wrap that he's had around his right wrist for several weeks. I think it was halftime. I think Bruce, Pasco, our colleague, reported of the semifinals that he just was like, enough of this. I don't need this. And I'm sure that that's affected him. in some ways, whether it's shooting or ball handling. But I agree. I like the way that he's trending. I always talk a lot about stocks, steals plus blocks, and him and Carter Bryant and Henry Vasar, they're always going to contribute in the area of stocks. That's kind of what they, some of what they bring to the table. Obviously, Carter Bryant's got a really beautiful stroke from the outside. I mean, you can see the template for a lottery pick, right?
Yep.
With his skill set, his size, his shooting touch. KJ hasn't really developed from the outside the way that we all hoped that he would this year. His 3-point percentage has actually gone down from where it was, but he makes up for it in a lot of other ways. Like he gets to the line a lot. Like he's really strong. He's really aggressive going to the basket, and he plays super hard on defense all the time. He is the guy that you would want to put on the other team's best scorer if you can. What's nice about this Arizona team, though, is that sometimes they put Caleb Love on the other team's best scorer, and he's done a really good job.
Not bad
as a defender this year, which is definitely not something that he was known for coming into the year.
By the way, before we move on to spring football,
yeah.
Arizona women's basketball hosting the WBIT on Thursday, and they're hosting NAU, the team that could be the reason why they didn't make the NCAA tournament, right? If you think about it, like their resume, they were a bubble team. They were just on the outside looking in. And one of those blemishes on their record is the loss to the NAU Lumberjacks. And now they got them on Thursday. How do you feel the vibe is going to be like at Thursday at McKale Center? Because I don't know, there's just a lot of interesting things happening with Arizona women's basketball because they missed out on the NCAA tournament. And then there have been reports out there that Auburn is interested in Adia Barnes as a potential head coach. And Adia Barnes, as we all know, is going into her final year under contract. And coaches don't usually go until they're into their final year without a contract extension. And I think it's like May 30th or something like that. If Auburn waits until May 30th, then they don't have to pay Adia Barnes' buyout. But if they hire her now, they got to pay like $300,000. So Auburn's like, hey, we might wait for Adia Barnes. And again, I'm not sure if they hired a new head coach, so I don't know what's going on there. But Adia Barnes has been linked to other jobs, and Arizona is going into the WBIT and hosting this. So, and if you think about it, the last time they hosted a WBIT event, they won the whole damn thing, and that's really what kind of kickstarted the Adia Barnes era at Arizona. So I'm curious to see how things end up going on Thursday.
Yeah, I would agree that the vibe is sort of unknown, right?
Yeah.
Like it could, people have shown up in force for Arizona women's basketball. I made this spreadsheet, Justin, because I like to do that from time to time. I took the average attendance for men's and women's basketball this past season. I took it off the NCAA site and I made a spreadsheet because this is for this column that I wrote about where I was advocating Tucson and McKale Center as the future home of the West Coast First Four, which feels like an inevitability when the NCAA tournament expands, right? Like, feel like we should be the ones to host this, right? We're big basketball town, all that stuff. Anyway, so I wanted to look at combined attendance between men's and women's basketball. And sure enough, Arizona, the highest combined attendance between the two for any school west of Texas. And buoyed, of course, by strong women's basketball attendance, an average of 6,930 per game. When Adia Barnes first took over the job 10 years ago or whenever that was, I mean, they probably didn't get 1,000 people in that building, right? So I think people will show up, even if they're viewing it as sort of a bon voyage for her. There could be a contract stalemate in the offing here. She's heading into her last year. You never want to have your coach coaching on the last year of a deal. She makes a lot of money. We know that finances are a big deal for Arizona athletics right now. And, would she be willing to maybe take a pay cut? Could there be some sort of deal that's worked out where, some of her salary goes toward NIL or revenue sharing. That's going to be a really interesting one. On the court, our colleague PJ Brown reported yesterday that Jada Williams might not play, which is a very, very big deal. Jada Williams has been bothered all season by some sort of like foot or Achilles or something in that area. She sprained her ankle a bunch of times, and it was up in the air whether she was going to participate in this WBIT. Jada Williams is like the ultimate competitor. She will throw her body on the floor repeatedly during the course of a game to try to draw charges, dive for loose balls, etc. And the last time that they played against NAU, they didn't have Jada Williams. And they ended up losing that game. That was up in Flagstaff. Their compete level was not what it needed to be without her. So despite the fact that, Arizona is one of the top seeds in this tournament, if she doesn't play, I think that kind of becomes a toss-up game. And, you might not see them make the kind of run that they made back in, was it 2019, when they won what was then called the WNIT.
All right, Lev. Now on to Arizona spring football. It was like first day of school on Tuesday. Arizona and Brent Brennan and company, they get out there. Like we said earlier, lots of new faces, lots of jersey changes. And I'm curious to get your opinion on this, Lev, before we get into kind of what we took away from Tuesday and the first day of practice. What do you think about this new era of the spring game, which is now called the spring showcase? Because, if you look at college football and Power 4 programs across the country, we're talking about like 20 teams canceling their spring games. Like, I don't think Nebraska, they're not hosting a spring game. And they put people in the stands for those games, right? Like, people love Nebraska football. They show up for that. USC, they're not having a spring game. Texas, another prominent program that's not having a spring game. And Brent Brennan came out and said, yeah, we're going to do the spring showcase, but we're going to have drills. We're going to have just kind of a lot of interactive things for our fans to do. There's going to be a beer garden on the field, and it's really just going to be kind of like a fan experience with our Arizona football team, and we're going to use that day to really promote the program, which I think is the smart move for Brent Brennan, because you have to do whatever you can to promote the program and get your players out in front of the community. Like, we've talked about this. You have talked about this, how you have a generational talent in Tetairoa McMillan on your team. And how many autograph sessions did he do while he was at Arizona? Freaking zero. And meanwhile, this year, I see Arizona football having autograph sessions before softball games, before baseball games, before basketball games. They're getting out into the public. And now this spring showcase, they're making it free for fans to attend. And if you want to meet Noah Fafita, if you want to meet some of these other guys on the team, you're more than welcome to do so. So I think it's great that Arizona is doing it this way, but I also think it's very interesting and very telling of the current times that Brent Brennan's like, no, man, we're not doing a spring game because we got to protect our assets. We're giving these guys a lot of money to play football for us. And while it would be nice to see them play football in March, we need them to be ready in September and October and November.
Yes. The subject of spring football games is this very interesting one. I think the main reason, as I understand it, that most of the other schools have canceled theirs is they're concerned about poaching, right? Like, some unknown player looks amazing in a spring game that's televised by ESPN or SEC Network. All of a sudden, the word is out, and that player gets, quote unquote, stolen away in the spring transfer portal, which probably really shouldn't be a thing, honestly, right? And I think most coaches would favor there being only one portal window whenever it is, and probably still going to be somewhere in that December, January range. So that's one of the main reasons that teams are canceling their spring games, and I understand it. Another reason is concern about injury, right? Like, Brent Brennan talked about this. Like, the fact of the matter is, these guys make money. And the last thing you want to do when you're paying $200,000, $300,000 for a player is for him to get hurt in a, quote unquote, meaningless exhibition, right? Now, how can you still do something good for the fans? You can put on what's basically like a football festival, right? With a beer garden and autograph signings and an Easter egg hunt for kids and whatever. I think it's a great move. It is exactly what they failed to do in the run up to last year. But they're doing it now. There's been so much more community outreach. They need to connect with the community because they need to sell tickets, right? They need to drum up enthusiasm for this program. And let's face it, like enthusiasm is not exactly at an all-time high right now, based on like year one of Brent Brennan, the results that they had, some of the players that they've lost, etc. I feel like, Justin, that there's just way more intent and organization on the part of the entire football operation heading into year two than there was into year one, whether it's dealing with us, reaching out to the community, the messaging from Brent Brennan himself. I feel like they're way more on top of things. I don't know if that's just, they've had a full year to get settled and they were just kind of really thrown into the fire last year. I think that's definitely part of it. And part of it too is just probably Desiree Reed-Francois has, had some conversations with them about messaging. She's really big on that. So I feel like the spring format that they've come up with is just sort of an example of the overall thrust toward reaching out to the community, connecting with the community, having a better grasp of all those things outside of what goes on between the white lines.
And in those white lines, what did you take away from today? Lots of things happening. Now, there are, only some things you can take away from the first day of spring ball, right? Like we didn't see any team periods or anything like that. But man, I will say it definitely feels like the offense is going to have some snappiness to it. Like the wide receivers were running short routes. The passes just look quick. Noah Fafita was talking about, we're doing no huddle. I can't even remember was the last time I did no huddle. And that's what you're getting out of new offensive coordinator, Seth Dagey. They have a purpose, which is completely different than last year. I mean, last year, heck, just getting out of the huddle, they were so slow. Now these guys have a sense of urgency on the offensive side of the ball, which should make for a pretty exciting brand, because you know what? If Arizona's going to lose a football game, you might as well lose 50-49, right?
Right. Everything was so slow last year, right? Like the way they operated on offense, it just felt like everything was moving at a glacial pace. With the slow developing running plays, which we noticed like right away, and we're like, what are these plays? And they required such precise timing, and you had to be so exact, like hitting your targets for those plays to work. This is a completely different offense. This is an up-tempo offense, no huddle offense. We could see it already. They are utilizing different parts of the field. I was making jokes today about, Noah Fafita's ADOT is going to be half of what it was last year, his average depth of target. He himself talked about like the need to play more within the structure of the offense versus, these kind of unscripted, unstructured plays that they kind of resorted to a lot last year. And I think that it's going to be a big improvement. Seth Dagey, you can only imagine how much time Seth Dagey and Noah Fafita already have spent together working on this thing. Like they are workshopping this problem of the Arizona offense. And I like what I saw on day one. Like you said, there was a lot of snappiness to it. I loved Noah's comment too. He was like, I thought we were going fast, and Seth was disappointed that we weren't going even faster. Right. So I think it's going to be a very different look on offense. We saw slant passes today. We saw screen passes. Big emphasis on getting the ball out of Noah Fafita's hand in a timely manner, which was a huge problem for him and for them last year.
And then at wide receiver, you got Trey Spivey, the transfer from Kansas State. He was in kind of the starting mix there. throughout
Yeah,
the
the
throughout
outside
practice.
receiver. Yeah. Hmm.
Pretty much where T-Mac was. And speaking of T-Mac, the Arizona's new number 4, he ain't as big as T-Mac.
No, but he was
Yeah.
very involved in the
Yes.
proceedings. Like he looked like he was the number one slot receiver,
Yep.
just based on the way that they were lining up. We're talking about Chris Hudson, transfer from Washington State, who began his career at Oregon. I feel like, and then Chris Hunter was the other wide receiver. He arrived a little bit late because he had a class today that conflicted with the first part of practice. When he wasn't in there, it was Luke Wysong. I feel like Luke Wysong and Chris are going to catch a gazillion passes for them this year. I mean, that's kind of what they were brought in here for, right? On Chris Hunter, we saw him develop late in the year, last year, into a pretty impressive looking player who obviously has a good combination of size and speed, and showed he could make some T-Mac-esque catches, right? It's some really good ones that it was at TCU at the end of the year, where he looked really, really good, making those tiptoe grabs like back of the end zone or along the sideline. Very different looking receiving core. And I think that is something that is very exciting for Brent Brennan, who's a wide receiver coach at heart. It's like the position that he spends the most time coaching and is involved with the most. And despite the fact that they had T-Mac last year and Chris Hunter's development over the second half of the year, I think he felt like there was more meat on the bone, and it's a different looking group this year. I think there's more speed, throughout the group, and they're going to be asked to do different things in this offense than they were asked to do last year.
Speaking of wide receivers and speed, real quick, what did you make of Tetairoa McMillan's 40-yard dash time? So we didn't see him run the 40-yard dash at the
No.
NFL Scouting Combine. Big 12
Nope.
Pro Day is happening this week in Dallas. And we were like, well, why doesn't he want to get this 40-yard dash time out there? Like, don't you like that? That's the biggest concern you have with your game. Don't you just want to shut everybody up? And T-Mac was like, hey, guys, don't worry. I know I'm not at these cool events working out. I'm the main attraction. These guys come to me. I'm holding the workout at Arizona Stadium or the practice center, wherever they were. They were on the U of A campus, and they held a private workout where 24 coaches came out and watched T-Mac run. His buddy Noah Fafita was throwing him passes, which I'm sure he looked very great because they have a connection, and I'm sure T-Mac looked like a wide receiver one during that part of the workout. But I've seen times from like 4.46, 4.48, all the way to like 4.55, something like that, or 4.54. So I think it's pretty much safe to say high 4.4s, low 4.5s. No matter which time it is, the fact that he is 6'5", 215 pounds, and can run like that, and can also high point any ball and win 50-50 catches, I think T-Mac right there, getting that 40-yard time out there, he should be a bona fide top 10 pick, in my opinion.
I agree with you. This happened at a private workout, basically, just for T-Mac on the Arizona campus. No media.
T-Mac's Pro Day.
T-Mac's Pro Day, basically. And anything below 4.55 to me, and he was going to be just fine. Because, as you mentioned, he's 6'4", 6'5". I think he weighed in at 213 pounds. He's probably going to, play at 220, 225. He is a really good athlete, right? A very natural, fluid athlete. He's not stiff at all. I did not remember a lot of times where I was like, man, he's having trouble separating. Like to me, that did not stand out in his game. His route tree blossomed over the course of his career here. He improved so much as a runner after the catch in his final season, which, by the way, began with him rehabbing a foot injury, right? Or ankle or whatever that issue was that he had incurred the previous spring, right? And we weren't even 100% sure that he was going to play last year. Like he could have hit the eject button and been like, oh, I'm going to be a first round pick. I'm out of here. This isn't worth it. Nope. Work ethic, put in the time, got himself back out there, was not going to, abandon the ship. Was going to play with his buddy Noah Fafita one last time. I would be shocked, absolutely floored, if he's not like a top half of the first round pick. And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is just a typical like pre-draft smoke, that, and not, I don't know how much of it is legit, but T-Mac to me is the real deal. I think he is a Mike Evans type, Drake London. I've seen people comp him to T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins, I think, was a second-round pick, but he's certainly outplayed where he was drafted. So if that's what you're getting, if T. Higgins is the floor of what you're getting, then T-Mac's going to have himself a nice NFL career, and whoever drafts him will be very happy with that selection.
Just look at the Colorado tape last year in 2023 when Travis Hunter was lined up on him pretty much the entire game. And there's actually like a highlight clip of Tetairoa McMillan against Travis Hunter, and you could honestly look at every single clip and every single play of those two lined up against each other, and you can honestly make a case that T-Mac wins the rep every single time. If T-Mac is consistently winning reps against a Heisman Trophy winner, a guy that could be a top 3 pick, or that is going to be a top 3 pick, what else do we need to talk about? And he just showed us time. Come on.
Yeah, I think, people will say like, he didn't always like go full speed when he was out there, but I think he's just got such a natural feel for how to get open that sometimes he would intentionally like dial it down a little bit, and then he would accelerate to try to pull away from a corner. Also has a really good feel for space, right? I think that was one of the takeaways from Justin's very, very interesting Q&A with the creator of the AIQ.
Yes, Dr. Scott
AIQ
Coleman.
test. Like, he's one of these guys who's just understands spatial relationships really well. I bet you if Wayne Gretzky took that test like 40 years ago, he would have scored like the highest that you could possibly score. Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, like people who can see the ice or see the floor. To me, T-Mac has that too. Like, if you're going to play zone coverage, he's going to find the soft spot in the zone. He's going to get open, and then he's going to do damage after the catch. And then on top of all that, he has elite plus hands, right? One-handed catches, sideline catches. If it is a contested catch situation, it's not a 50-50 ball, right? It's like an 80-20 ball because T-Mac's going to win most of the time.
All right, draft a little over a month away. We got spring ball happening right now. And, of course, March Madness, both the Arizona men's basketball team and women's basketball. They got postseason. Arizona men's basketball, they have the Akron Zips this Friday afternoon. We'll have all the coverage on Tucson.com. Lots happening. March is a busy time of year for all of us. Arizona softball, Arizona baseball, like I said earlier in the show, they're kicking ass right now. They're going to hit the road here very soon. So, exciting times. Make sure you check out all of our coverage of the Arizona Wildcats and all things Southern Arizona sports by going to Tucson.com. And per usual, subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast.